The morning Marcus Hale failed to exist, he was mopping the same 30 feet of marble he had mopped for 11 years. Not failed to exist in any dramatic sense. No one collapsed. No alarm sounded. The building did not shudder. He simply moved through the lobby of Vantara Aerospace's headquarters the way weather moves through an empty field, present, necessary, and entirely unnoticed. It was 6:47 a.m. The executive floor would not stir for another hour. That was by design. Marcus had learned early that the best way to do his job was to finish it before anyone arrived to watch him do it. Not because he was ashamed, because he understood something about powerful people that they had never bothered to understand about him, that they could not see what was already done. Only what remained undone. He wrung the mop. The water ran gray and then clear. He moved on. By the time the glass elevator began its first descent of the morning, carrying Derek Paulson, Chief Executive Officer, pressed suit, titanium watch, the particular posture of a man who has never once doubted his own reflection, Marcus had already moved to the east corridor. He was invisible before Derek even stepped off the elevator. That was the rhythm of their shared world. One man arrived. The other disappeared. Derek did not look toward the corridor. He never did. What Marcus carried to work each morning fit inside a canvas lunch bag that had a small iron-on patch near the zipper, a cartoon rocket ship, faded almost to nothing, that his daughter Lily had pressed on herself when she was 6. She was 13 now. He had asked her once if she wanted him to get a new bag. She'd looked at him the way only a 13-year-old can look at a father, like he had suggested burning down something sacred. "Don't you dare," she said. So he didn't. Inside the bag on this particular Tuesday, one thermos of black coffee, one container of leftover rice and lentils, a permission slip for a school field trip that he needed to sign and return, and a folded piece of paper on which Lily had drawn, in colored pencil, a small aircraft with the words "Dad's Rocket" written along the fuselage in her careful, deliberate handwriting. She left him drawings sometimes, tucked into the bag while he slept. He never mentioned them when he dropped her at school. He just touched her shoulder a little longer than usual, and she understood. He kept every drawing. There was a shoebox under his bed. At 8:15, the announcement came through the building's internal channel, not broadcast overhead, but circulated quietly among senior staff in a way that still somehow reached the break room where Marcus was refilling his thermos. The words were clipped and careful, the language of people managing panic with vocabulary. Vantara 1, the company's flagship Gulfstream G700, had failed its pre-flight inspection. The jet was grounded. Not a small thing. Derek Paulson was scheduled to fly to Geneva in 31 hours for a merger signing that had taken 14 months to negotiate. The kind of deal that defined careers. The kind of deal that, if it dissolved, did not simply delay things, it ended them. Contracts, reputations, board relationships. All of it sitting on a runway, attached to a plane that could not leave the ground. Marcus heard the words. He poured his coffee. He said nothing, but something moved behind his eyes. Not excitement, not satisfaction. Something quieter and more complicated than either. The look of a man who has been carrying a specific kind of knowledge for a very long time, in a place where no one thought to look for it. By 9 a.m., the executive floor was controlled chaos dressed in expensive clothes. Aviation consultants were being called. The manufacturer's service line had been contacted. Someone mentioned flying in a specialist from Dallas. Someone else mentioned the Geneva timeline, and the word impossible appeared in the conversation 3 times in 4 minutes. Marcus rolled his cart past the open conference room door. Through the glass, he could see Derek standing at the head of the table, jaw tight, the titanium watch catching the light as he pressed his knuckles into the surface. No one looked up. Marcus kept moving. He had a corridor to finish. He had a permission slip to sign. He had a drawing of a rocket ship in his lunch bag, and a daughter who believed, without question or condition, that her father hung the stars. He would get to the rest of it in his own time. There is a particular kind of man the world does not know how to hold. Not broken. Not bitter. Not defeated in any of the ways that make for clean, comfortable narratives. Just displaced. Set down in the wrong chapter of his own story by a series of events that had nothing to do with his worth and everything to do with his timing. Marcus Hale was that kind of man. He had not always mopped floors. For 9 years, he had worked as a senior aviation maintenance engineer at Kellerman Aerospace, a mid-sized defense contractor outside of Columbus, Ohio, that specialized in turbine propulsion systems. His hands, which now guided a mop handle through marble corridors, had once guided diagnostic instruments through the inner architecture of jet engines worth more than most houses. He had not merely fixed things. He had understood them. There is a difference, and people who have never worked with precision machinery rarely appreciate it. Understanding a turbine engine is not mechanical. It is almost musical. There are harmonics in the way a compressor breathes, rhythms in the rotation of a high-pressure spool, a specific silence that precedes a specific failure, and Marcus could hear all of it. His supervisor at Kellerman, a retired Air Force engineer named Raymond Potts, had told him once, without ceremony or exaggeration, that Marcus had the finest diagnostic instinct he had encountered in 30 years. Raymond was not a man who said things he did not mean. Then came the year everything changed. And it did not change dramatically. It changed the way most lives change, quietly, incrementally, through a series of small decisions made by people who were not thinking about Marcus Hale at all. The defense contract that sustained Kellerman's propulsion division was restructured. Budgets shifted. Entire departments were reclassified. Marcus was not fired. He was, in the bloodless language of corporate reorganization, made redundant, a phrase that always struck him as grotesque, because it implied that the person had been excessive to begin with. He was 34 years old. He had a pregnant wife, a mortgage on a small house in a suburb of Columbus, and the kind of quiet confidence in his own future that a man builds over years of doing excellent work and being told so. 6 weeks after his redundancy notice, his wife Elena went into labor 8 weeks early. Lily arrived fighting. 2 pounds 11 ounces, a NICU incubator, monitors that beeped through the night. Marcus sat beside that incubator for 16 days in a row, sleeping in a chair, learning the rhythm of each machine the way he had once learned the rhythm of engines, listening for the sounds that meant safety, tensing at the ones that didn't. Elena did not recover well. The pregnancy had been harder than anyone acknowledged until it was over. The early months after Lily came home were marked by a fragility in Elena that neither of them fully named. Postpartum depression that deepened rather than lifted, that shifted eventually into something longer and more structural. Marcus did not judge her. He loved her. He tried to hold the household together with one hand and look for engineering work with the other. It was not enough. Not because he failed. Because some weights are distributed unfairly. Elena left when Lily was 2. Not without love. Not without pain. She left because she was drowning, and she knew, with the clarity that drowning people sometimes find, that staying would pull them all under. She called sometimes. She sent birthday cards. She was not a villain in this story. She was a woman who had been handed more than she could carry. Marcus became the only parent. He found the janitorial position at Vantara through a temp agency, during a period when his engineering license had lapsed. A paperwork casualty of 2 years spent entirely focused on keeping a premature infant healthy and a household solvent. The license could be renewed. He knew that. He told himself it was temporary. That was 11 years ago. Not because he gave up. Because Lily stabilized, and then thrived, and then needed stability more than she needed him to chase something. Because the school she attended was 3 blocks from Vantara's headquarters. Because the hours fit. Because some decisions that look like surrender are actually a father calculating, with quiet precision, what his child needs most. He had chosen her. Every morning. Without drama or announcement. The shoebox under his bed held 147 drawings. He had counted. Derek Paulson was not a cruel man. That is the important thing to understand about him. And the most difficult, because cruelty would have been simpler. Cruelty has edges you can identify, corners you can point to and say, there, that is where the damage lives. Derek offered no such clarity. He was something more ordinary and more insidious than cruel. He was oblivious. Completely, expensively, architecturally oblivious. He had built Vantara Aerospace from a regional parts supplier into a mid-tier aerospace firm with 400 employees, 2 government contracts, and a brand new Gulfstream G700 that he had personally selected from a catalog the way other men select watches. He was, by any conventional measure, a success. And he wore that success the way a second skin, not arrogantly, exactly, but with the deep, unexamined ease of a man who had never seriously considered the possibility that the world might be arranged differently than it appeared to him. He had grown up comfortable. Not wealthy, comfortable. The particular comfort that provides good schools and reliable cars and parents who attended every recital and told their son, consistently and sincerely, that he was exceptional. He had absorbed this message the way children absorb everything given to them without question. Completely. He was not wrong that he was capable. He was wrong that capability was his alone. Derek moved through Vantara's headquarters with the fluid authority of a man who had never been invisible. He knew the names of his senior staff, his legal team, his preferred catering vendor. He did not know the names of the people who cleaned his building. This was not a conscious choice. It was not even negligence in the way negligence is usually understood, as a failure of attention. It was something pre-attentive. A sorting that happened before awareness, that placed certain people inside the frame of his world and left others outside it entirely. Marcus had worked in that building for 11 years. Derek, if asked directly, would have said there was a janitorial staff. He might have estimated 3 or 4 people. He would not have been able to describe a single face. On the morning Vantara 1 failed inspection, Derek's obliviousness sharpened into something uglier. Not malice, but pressure, and pressure applied by people who do not see you is indistinguishable from malice in its effects. He stood at the head of the conference table and ran through options with the clipped efficiency of a man accustomed to problems that money could solve. The Dallas specialist, unavailable for 36 hours. The manufacturer's service line, helpful in tone, useless in timeline. A charter alternative possible, but the Geneva counterparts had specifically requested a direct, private arrival as a signal of Vantara's operational stature. Arriving commercial was not, in Derek's calculus, an option. He needed the plane fixed. He needed it fixed now. And he needed someone who understood legacy turbine systems in a G700's APU configuration. A specific, narrow competency that had become increasingly rare as the industry moved toward newer platforms, and the engineers who knew the old ones retired or disappeared. "Find me someone," he said, not unkindly, simply, the way a man speaks when he has never had to find anything himself. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Priya who had learned to translate Derek's certainty into operational action, began making calls. At 10:23 a.m., Marcus was in the east stairwell with a bucket and a mop, working on a coffee spill someone had tracked down from the second floor. The stairwell smelled of disinfectant and old concrete. The fluorescent light above him buzzed at a frequency that, after 11 years, he no longer heard. Through the fire door, muffled but unmistakable, he could hear the conference room. Not words, tone. The specific register of expensive panic, controlled on the surface, fraying underneath. He had heard engines make that sound. Right before something critical failed. He dipped the mop. He wrung it. He kept working. He was not indifferent. He was patient. There is a profound difference between those two things, and Marcus understood it the way he understood turbines. From the inside, in the dark, by feel. Derek Paulson needed something that did not exist in his world. It had been standing 30 feet away from him for 11 years. And it was currently mopping a stairwell, thinking about a permission slip, and wondering whether Lily would want pasta or rice for dinner. It was Priya who found him. Not through any database or credential search. Not through a professional network or a licensing board. She found him the way important things are sometimes found, by accident, through a door left slightly open, by someone paying attention when attention was in short supply. She had stepped into the east stairwell to take a phone call away from the noise of the conference room. Marcus was still there, finishing the last section of the spill, his cart parked neatly against the wall. She almost didn't speak. Then she noticed what he was doing with his hands. He was not simply mopping. He was working in a precise, systematic pattern, quadrant by quadrant, pressure calibrated to surface, the mop head angled at exactly the right degree to avoid streaking. It was the movement of someone trained in procedural exactness. The kind of motor memory that does not come from cleaning floors. Priya was 28, and she was smarter than most people in that building gave her credit for. She noticed things. "You work here every day?" she asked. Not dismissively. Genuinely. 11 years. Marcus said, without stopping. She hesitated. Then, do you know anything about aircraft engines? He was quiet for a moment. The mop slowed. Some, he said. What followed was not a dramatic reveal. Marcus did not produce credentials from his pocket or deliver a speech. He asked one question, a single, specific question about the nature of the inspection failure, and the way he asked it stopped Priya mid-sentence. He had used a term she didn't recognize. She looked it up on her phone while he waited. It was a real term, precise term, the kind used by people who worked inside engines, not around them. She called Derek's head of operations from the stairwell. 20 minutes later, Marcus Hale was standing on the tarmac at Vantara's private hangar, still in his work uniform, canvas lunch bag set carefully to the side, looking at a Gulfstream G700 that had failed its auxiliary power unit inspection due to a fault that 2 certified technicians and 1 manufacturer's representative had spent 4 hours failing to isolate. He looked at the aircraft the way he used to look at engines. Not with urgency, not with performance, but with the still, absorptive attention of a man reading something he loves in a language he has never forgotten. He asked for a diagnostic readout. He asked for the maintenance log going back 18 months. He asked, quietly, whether anyone had checked the bleed air valve sequencing under cold soak conditions. No one had. What Marcus understood, and what made his particular expertise so rare, was that the G700's APU system had a known but poorly documented interaction between its bleed air management software and a legacy valve component that Gulfstream had retained from the G550 platform. Under specific cold soak conditions, aircraft sitting overnight in temperatures below 40 degrees, as Vantara 1 had done, the valve could develop a micro-delay in its pressure equalization sequence. Not enough to trigger standard diagnostics. Enough to fail an airworthiness check. It was the kind of fault that hid inside the space between what the computer reported and what was physically happening. You could not find it by reading. You had to know to look for it. And you only knew to look for it if you had seen it before, in a different aircraft on a cold runway 11 years ago, in a life that the current version of yourself had apparently ceased to inhabit. Marcus had seen it before. He explained this to the operations director in approximately 4 sentences. Then he asked for a specific calibration tool, giving the exact manufacturer reference number from memory and a thermal variance log from the previous night. The operations director stared at him for a long moment. Then he made a call. Marcus worked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He did not rush. He did not perform. He moved through the diagnostic sequence with the same systematic precision Priya had noticed in the stairwell, quadrant by quadrant, pressure calibrated, nothing wasted. The 2 certified technicians stood nearby, watching in the particular silence of people who are learning something they did not expect to need to learn today. When it was done, he stepped back. He looked at the aircraft once more. He picked up his lunch bag. Inside it, tucked against the thermos, was a drawing of a rocket ship. Dad's rocket. Faded. Careful. Unconditional. He zipped the bag closed. "It'll pass now," he said, and walked back toward the building to finish his corridor. The aircraft passed its reinspection at 2:47 p.m. The certification engineer signed the airworthiness release. The operations director forwarded the documentation to Derek's office with a subject line that contained no exclamation points, no superlatives, just the bare, clinical language of a problem resolved. Derek read it at his desk, felt the specific relief of a man who has been holding his breath for 6 hours, and exhaled. He did not yet know how it had been resolved. That came 20 minutes later, when his operations director, a careful man named Tom Briggs who chose his moments deliberately, knocked on the office door and asked if Derek had a few minutes. Tom told the story plainly. The stairwell, Priya's question, the single precise term, the tarmac, the 2 hours and 40 minutes, the calibration tool requested by manufacturer reference number from memory, the technicians watching in silence. Derek listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. Something in Tom's delivery, unhurried, factual, carrying the specific weight of a man recounting something that had genuinely surprised him, held Derek still. When Tom finished, Derek said, "The janitor." Not a question, a recalibration, the sound of a category collapsing. "His name is Marcus Hale," Tom said. "He's been here 11 years. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then, Why is he mopping floors? Tom looked at him with the patience of someone who understood that the answer to that question was longer and more uncomfortable than the afternoon would accommodate. I think that's worth asking him, he said. This is where the story could have turned clean. Where Derek could have walked down the corridor, found Marcus, shaken his hand, offered him something. A promotion, a title, a salary that matched what his hands were actually worth, and the whole thing could have resolved into a neat, redemptive HR narrative. But the crisis was not Derek's to have. It was Marcus's. It arrived at 3:15 p.m. in the form of a phone call from Lily's school. He was in the supply room, restocking his cart, when his phone buzzed. The school nurse. Lily had collapsed during afternoon PE. Not seriously, the nurse was careful to use that word, not seriously, but she had fainted and her heart rate was irregular, and they were recommending he come in and that she be seen by a physician before going home. Marcus set down the bottle of cleaning solution he was holding. He set it down carefully, the way he did everything, without drama, without haste that would cause spilling. Then he stood very still for approximately 4 seconds. There is a fear that belongs exclusively to single parents. It is not the ordinary fear that parents share, the universal animal terror of a child in danger. It is that, plus the specific arithmetic of being the only one to receive the call, the only one to leave work, the only one to sit in the waiting room, the only one to hold the hand and ask the questions and carry the answer home and figure out, alone in the quiet after the child sleeps, what the answer means and what comes next. Marcus had lived inside that arithmetic for 13 years. He picked up the supply room phone and called his supervisor to say he needed to leave. His supervisor, a decent man named Phil who had long since learned not to ask Marcus unnecessary questions, told him to go. He collected his cart. He stored it in the correct bay. He logged out of the system. He took his canvas lunch bag from his locker, rocket ship patch facing out the way it always was, and he walked to the elevator. In the lobby, he passed the marble floor he had mopped at 6:47 that morning. It was still clean. It would be clean when he returned, if he returned. That was the nature of the work. It did not remember you. It simply waited. He pushed through the glass door into the afternoon light. Behind him, on the executive floor, Tom Briggs was still in Derek Paulson's office. Derek was asking questions about Marcus Hale that he should have asked 11 years ago. The answers were arriving slowly, the way truths arrive when they have been waiting a long time to be requested. Marcus was already 3 blocks away, walking fast, the lunch bag over his shoulder, thinking only of his daughter. The merger could wait. Geneva could wait. Everything that was not Lily could wait. It always could. Lily was fine. The physician at the urgent care clinic, a calm, unhurried woman named Dr. Osei who spoke to Lily directly rather than over her, which Marcus noted and appreciated, determined that the episode was vasovagal, a fainting response triggered by dehydration and the specific combination of heat and exertion. Common, manageable, not a signal of anything structural or serious. Drink more water, Dr. Osei told Lily, with the particular dry warmth of someone who had delivered this instruction 10,000 times and still meant it. She won't, Marcus said. I might, Lily said, which from Lily constituted a binding commitment. They were home by 6. Marcus made pasta, her choice, communicated via a look exchanged in the parking lot that required no words, and they ate at the small kitchen table with the window open and the evening coming in soft and unhurried. Lily told him about PE class, about the way the floor had tilted before it came up to meet her, about how Destiny from her homeroom had caught her arm on the way down and stayed with her until the nurse arrived. Destiny sounds like a good person, Marcus said. She's okay, Lily said, which from Lily meant the same as fine from anyone else. After dinner, she did homework at the table while he washed dishes. She asked him once how his day was. He said quiet, which was true in the way that most true things are incomplete. The call from Tom Briggs came at 8:47 p.m., after Lily was in bed. Marcus took it on the small back porch in the dark, where he sometimes sat after she slept. Not from loneliness, but from the specific need of single parents to exist for a few minutes without being needed by anyone. Tom was straightforward. He told Marcus that Derek Paulson wanted to meet with him, that there were things the company wanted to discuss, that what Marcus had done on the tarmac that afternoon had, Tom paused here, choosing words, changed some understandings. Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking at the dark yard. About what? He asked. About what you know, Tom said. And what Vantara has been walking past for 11 years. The meeting happened 3 days later. Marcus came in his work uniform because it was a work day and he was still a janitor at Vantara Aerospace. He sat across from Derek Paulson in the same conference room where, 72 hours earlier, expensive Panic had been dressed in tailored clothing. Derek was different in the room. Not diminished but altered. Quieter. The specific quiet of a man who has recently received information that required him to revise something he had believed without examining it. He asked Marcus about Kellerman, about Raymond Potts, about the G550 fault which Marcus described with the same even technical clarity he had used on the Tarmac. He asked about the lapsed license and Marcus explained it plainly, the redundancy, the early birth, the NICU, the years of recalibration, the choice. He did not editorialize. He did not ask for sympathy. He simply described the sequence of events the way he diagnosed engines, accurately without drama in the correct order. Derek listened. And to his credit, this is worth saying because credit should go where it belongs, he listened without interrupting. Without the executive habit of summarizing before understanding. He listened the way a man listens when he knows he has been wrong about something important and has not yet decided what to do with that knowledge. When Marcus finished, Derek said, I'd like to offer you a position, Senior Avionics Maintenance Specialist. Full salary, full benefits. We'll cover the license renewal. Marcus looked at him. I have a daughter, he said. The hours would need to work. Tell me what works, Derek said. It was the first time in 11 years of shared building that Derek Paulson had asked Marcus Hale a question that required an answer. Marcus thought about Lily at the kitchen table, about the homework and the pasta and the window open to the evening, about the way she had said I might about the water, which was as close as she came to a promise. He thought about the shoebox under his bed. 147 drawings. 8 to 4, he said. No weekends unless it's a genuine emergency. Done, said Derek. Marcus nodded once, looked at the table, then looked up. Thank you, he said, and meant it without weight, without theater, without the burden of 11 years pressing behind the words. Just 2 words from a man who knew how to fix things, and had. He told Lily on a Saturday morning, not with ceremony, not sitting her down or preparing language or building toward it. He told her the way he told her most things, sideways while doing something else while the morning moved around them without agenda. They were making breakfast. She was in charge of the toast, her self-appointed role since she was 8, based on the logic, never articulated but consistently applied, that Marcus could not be trusted with the toaster. He scrambled eggs. The radio was on low, something instrumental, the kind of music that asks nothing of you. I got a new job, he said. At work. Different job. Lily considered this with the toast. Doing what? Engines, he said. Aircraft engines. She turned to look at him then. Not with surprise, exactly. Lily had always known, in the unspoken way children know the things their parents carry, that her father was more than what his title said. She had known it the way she knew to tuck drawings in his lunch bag, because something in him needed to be seen, even if only by a 13-year-old with colored pencils and a conviction that her father hung the stars. Obviously, she said, and turned back to the toast. He renewed his license over the following 6 weeks. The process was less difficult than he had expected and more emotional than he had prepared for. Sitting in the examination room with men 20 years younger than him, moving through questions that his hands remembered before his mind did. Muscle memory. The body's own filing system, patient and uncorrupted. He passed on the first attempt. He did not tell anyone at work. He filed the paperwork, received the confirmation, folded the document into thirds, and put it in the kitchen drawer where he kept important things. Lily's immunization records, the lease, the small envelope of emergency cash that he refreshed every 6 months. He put it there because that was where things that mattered went. Not displayed, not announced, simply held in the right place for when they were needed. Lily found it 3 days later, the way she found most things in that kitchen. Not snooping, just existing in the space with the attentiveness of a child who paid attention to her father the way her father paid attention to engines. She did not say anything. She put it back. That evening, tucked into his lunch bag for Monday morning, was a new drawing. Not the rocket ship this time. An aircraft, detailed, careful, with shading along the fuselage she had never done before. And along the wing, in her deliberate handwriting, a single word. Finally, Marcus started his new role on a Tuesday. Same building, different floor. He wore his work clothes the first day because the new uniform hadn't arrived yet, and there was something he quietly liked about that. Moving through the same corridors in the same canvas shoes, knowing what those corridors had held, and knowing also what they held now. Priya stopped him near the elevator. She smiled. Not the polished, professional smile of a building's assistant managing upward, but a real one, slightly crooked. The smile of someone who felt that they had been part of something they were glad about. Good, she said. Just that. Yeah, he said. He rode the elevator to the third floor. He sat at a desk that was not yet fully his, bare, practical, with a monitor and a maintenance manual and a coffee that Tom Briggs had left there without explanation. He opened the manual. He read. The language came back the way old languages always come back. Not like learning, but like remembering. Like a door you thought was locked that turns out only to have been closed. That afternoon at 3:47 p.m., Marcus Hale picked up his daughter from school for the first time in 11 years at a time that was not rushed. Not squeezed between a shift and a pickup window. Just there, on time, leaning against the car in the afternoon light while students poured through the double doors. Lily came out in the middle of the crowd. She saw him. She did not run. She was 13, and 13-year-olds do not run toward their fathers in public. But she walked faster than necessary. And when she reached him, she put her head briefly against his shoulder, just for a moment, the way she used to when she was small. He put his hand on the back of her head. He said nothing. Some things do not need language. Some things have been communicated over and over, through drawings tucked into lunch bags, through pasta on quiet evenings, through a man who showed up every day, in every version of himself the world required, and never once stopped being her father. The canvas bag was on the back seat. Rocket ship patch facing out. It always was.